This is Newt Gingrich, and I'm actually in San Francisco, where I'm giving a talk today to BIO, which is the organization of companies that are trying to take new biological breakthroughs and apply them to better health and better health care. So I have my glasses on because Christina Maroon has sent me a whole set of questions from people that I want to go through as part of this. But let me first say that I thought Hillary Clinton's speech last night was very effective. No conservative, no Republican should assume that she's going to be a pushover. Let me also say, and by the way, my hair is not quite right. I'm getting a cut tomorrow, so I apologize. Callista's already been all over me about my hair not being quite right. Anyway, I think she's going to be formidable. She has, of course, the FBI investigation and the scandals and all those things weighing her down. But we should not assume that the Clintons have any track record of defeating themselves. So I think she deserves a lot of credit. First woman to become the nominee of a major party. She gave a spectacular speech last night that laid out how she's going to campaign, what she's going to try to do. And I think that the Republicans in general and the Trump folks in particular are going to have to really think through how they're going to deal with it. So anyway, let me say that I'm going to pull up now some of the questions. Zembri says, can Obama order the State Department to, excuse me, can they order the State Department, this keeps changing on me, to have Hillary's email sealed until after the election? I don't think so. I think that, in fact, they're going to continue coming out. They're going to continue the process of dealing with the emails. The problem yet is the State Department bureaucracy, which said absurdly that you have, I think they said it would take 75 years to release all of the emails that belong to the various assistants to Hillary Clinton. 75 years. Now, you want a case study in an incompetent bureaucracy has, you can't imagine a much clearer example than the State Department claiming it'll take 75 years. Barb Whiteman says, assuming Obama endorses Hillary fairly soon, does that endorsement seal the deal that no indictment will be forthcoming? I don't think so. I think they're two separate tracks. Obviously, the bias of the Clinton administration is going to be very heavily against indicting the Democratic nominee, but I think it partly depends on what the FBI says. I mean, if the FBI comes up and says absolutely she has to be indicted, it gets pretty tricky and pretty difficult. I'm trying to find the right way to hold this. Pretty difficult for the Obama administration to just turn him down, because the whole State Department, I mean the whole FBI at that point could potentially start leaking. So anyway, that's an example. I also think that it's important to recognize that Obama's endorsement is a two-edged sword. Last Friday, the jobs report came in and it said that we created one job last month, one job for every 8,000 Americans. Now, at that rate, I'm not so sure being embraced by Obama, if the economy keeps decaying for the next 3 or 4 months, is an asset. If you look at Obama's policies in the Middle East, failure in Libya, failure in Somalia, failure in Yemen, failure in Syria, failure in Iraq, increasingly precarious in Afghanistan. That's pretty touchy stuff to say, boy, I'm going to be just like Obama. And, of course, Hillary has been trapped because she has to run as the pro-Obama candidate in the Democratic primaries. It's not, there's no choice. So let me go back here again to Stella Goings says, how can Trump move to obtain the support of the millions of Sanders supporters who now find themselves having lost? Well, that's one of the significant things that the Trump campaign has to focus on. I believe the Trump campaign, having had some pretty bad mistakes, and I was very clear publicly about that, but I also remember, because I was a campaigner back then, I remember that Ronald Reagan had a terrible August of 1980. And all of us who were for Reagan were very worried that something bad was going to happen and that he was going to get defeated by Jimmy Carter. And they had to stop and reorganize their campaign. Craig Shirley, who was the leading biographer of Reagan and wrote an entire book on the 1980 campaign, recounts very vividly how many different things they had to do in August to get their campaign back on track. So I'm not in despair in early June, but I do think that Trump has to focus on making clear the big differences. And a good example is this economy. If Hillary Clinton believes that an economy that produces one job for every 8,000 Americans is an okay economy, well, Trump ought to be able to draw a big distinction. And then Trump can go to young people, many of whom are graduating from college and from Votech school with very substantial student loan debt. And Trump can say, look, if you think getting jobs at this rate and this level take-home pay is okay, having a health system that now charges you this amount of money is okay, you ought to vote for Hillary. But on the other hand, if you think that what we're really looking at is the opportunity to create a lot more jobs, to create a lot more new chances for Americans, then I'm your candidate. So I think that this is a situation where Trump, if he goes big, talks about big differences, talks about the opportunity to make a big difference. I think he does a better job than if he gets sucked down into a personality fight, which I think Hillary would love. I mean, if she could avoid talking about the economy, talking about left-wing judges, talking about failed foreign policy, if she could just get into a Hillary personality versus Donald personality, I think she would like that more than getting involved in a debate over reality. She can win a campaign of words. She cannot win a campaign based on reality because the realities simply aren't working for her. So let me go to another example. Carrie Lynn says, what needs to be done at this point to ensure a Trump victory for president? I think it's pretty clear. And I think there are only two or three big things. I think, one, that Trump has to become a much more disciplined candidate. He has to grow into being the kind of nominee that you want to have as president, because being a candidate for the nomination is one thing. Being a candidate to be President of the United States, leader of the free world, boy, that's a much tougher standard. So I think he's got to grow into that. More speeches like last night, which was a very fine speech, more speeches that are controlled and structured. And you'll notice that the news media was commenting that he was using a teleprompter. Hillary uses a teleprompter all the time. Obama uses a teleprompter all the time. Somehow, if you're a liberal, that's okay. And I think Trump's got to just recognize that's an objective requirement of being a successful leader at the level he's at. Second, as I said a minute ago, I think he's got to go big, not small. I think he's got to talk about the real concerns of the American people, the real differences between Trump and Hillary, and get it up to that level of a choice. You know, do you want to continue Obamacare, which in many ways was based on Hillary care? Do you think that these price increases are working? Do you think the insurance companies pulling out is working? Is that something you want to continue, which Hillary would? Or do you want to go to a brand new model that's much more personal choice, you and your doctor, individual opportunities to have savings accounts, etc.? Very big choices. If he does that, I think he has sense. And then third, in addition to being a disciplined candidate and offering a big choice campaign, he's got a campaign everywhere. Do not take today's polls as meaning anything. We live in an age of instant communication, as you and I are proving right now with Facebook Live. We live in an age of Twitter and Snapchat and Instagram and the ability to reach out and talk to people everywhere. He should plan to campaign in all 50 states. He is the least expensive candidate in modern times. He can afford to spread the campaign everywhere because every time he's on television, he's in the whole country. So if he's going to be in all 50 states anyway, he ought to go ahead and organize for being in all 50 states, and that would have an enormous effect on the campaign. So, Tracy Rogers. If I had to provide Trump advice, hold on, we're having a little bit of a technical issue. If I had to provide Trump advice on his general election campaign, how would I advise it? Well, Tracy, I think I just answered that. Three big things. Be a more disciplined candidate, focus on really big issues and really big choices, and campaign everywhere for everybody. Do not concede anybody to Hillary except her immediate family, but go after Latinos, go after African Americans, go after millennials, go after Asian Americans, go after Rhode Island and California. Assume that in an age of constant communication, you can be lots of places that people don't think you can be, and you can have a huge, huge impact. Actually, there are 3 in a row that are the same thing. Emma Brown asked something very, very similar, so I hope that that kind of solved that problem for you. Merle Stroud said, does any of the candidates have concerns for Social Security? Actually, this is one of the issues that I think won the nomination for Trump. Trump was the first Republican to say you can't touch Social Security. He really is very sensitive to senior citizens' needs and to the concerns of people who are relying on Social Security. And at the same time, he understands if you get economic growth, I mean, you look at our current pathetic growth rate, you look at the weakest presidency since the Great Depression in terms of job creation, you look at what that does to your revenue for Social Security, you got a big problem. On the other hand, if you got Ronald Reagan level economic growth, 5-6% a year, you put people back to work. You get them off disability, you get them off food stamps, you get them off unemployment, you put them back into the economy, earning taxes, paying Social Security taxes. You rebuild the Social Security fund very fast. So I think Trump's vision of a healthy, prosperous America relates directly to his desire to have an effective Social Security program. So we've covered a lot of ideas. I've got to run and give this speech over a bio. I hope you found this interesting. As you can tell, this is different than what we usually do. This is a handheld, on-the-road Facebook Live from San Francisco. One last thing, because I just can't resist saying this. One of the newspapers said, you know, the results in the primary for Trump showed that his recent mistakes had really cost him. Now, he got 81% in the New Jersey primary. He was in the 74, 77% virtually everywhere else. And I'm looking at this. Hillary's winning with 54%, and boy, that's a big victory. Trump's got 81%, and boy, that's a sign he's in trouble. You couldn't have a better example of the bias of the elite media than the idea that 81% for Trump is a sign of difficulty, and 54% for Hillary is a sign of a great achievement. And that's what you're going to get from here to Election Day, is on ending left-wing bias out of the media, consistent anti-Trump bias, and consistent efforts to prop up and protect Hillary. And we'll talk about it more in future Facebook Lives.